Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. Kevin is a retired United States Army Lieutenant Colonel who has studied UFOs for more than 50 years. His military training has provided him with unique insight into military operations and UFO research. Kevin has investigated many of the most mysterious cases and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries and been interviewed on hundreds of radio and television programs about UFOs. Considered to be one of the leading experts on the Roswell UFO crash, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including Roswell in the 21st Century and Encounter in the Desert, a re-examination of the Socorro UFO landing. Now here is the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
Of A Different Perspective, I am Kevin Randle. Before we get started, I'm going to do one of my patented, probably copyrighted rants is what I should say. First, I am tired of hearing pundits, talking heads, TV commentators talk about sending our sons and daughters into war. I'm only tired about this because A, it's much more than the sons and daughters. What about the mothers and fathers? And what about the grandparents? The oldest field grade officer to be killed in Iraq was 60. We had a command sergeant major in the Iowa National Guard, and she was deployed to Iraq. I mention this because the last time I saw her, she'd come into the staff meeting and said, I'm going on deployment. I'll be back in 6 months. I'll be back before you know it. 3 weeks later, she was killed when her helicopter was shot down. I mention this only because she was a grandmother. So I'm thinking that, when we're talking about who we deploy into the combat environments, we got to remember the mothers and fathers and the grandparents. We had a number of couples, married couples, who deployed with us. I was always thinking we should leave one of them home to take care of the children rather than deploy them both. The battalion commander didn't like my idea much, but that's a whole different story. The point simply is, it's much more than just the sons and daughters and the youngsters going into the combat environments. It's many of the older Americans as well. The other part of the rant has to do with something that annoys me and probably will be considered whining, but there's some things that trip my trigger. The other day I was looking for something specifically, and I came across a quote where they talked about the Barney and Betty Hill abduction and how originally they thought the aliens that Barney described were closer to those that were in the program The Outer Limits, called the Bolero Shield episode. I have said for literally decades that the alien that Barney described was much closer to a Twilight Zone episode called Hocus Pocus and Frisbee. The aliens in there looked a lot more like the alien that Hill described. And I'm thinking, I've said this for a long time. Somebody's finally picked up on it, but I get no credit for it. One other thing is the Gazette headline, Cedar Rapids Gazette headline, which I've always thought was classic, belongs in a science fiction movie. And it was from July 1952, sightings over Washington, D.C., and it said, "Saucers swarm over Capitol." Banner headline across the front page, big letters. I have seen that repeated many, many times, and I know I'm the one that discovered, but no credit is ever given to me. And finally, I think it's Susan Blackmore did a study on alien abduction, and she came up with the idea that sleep paralysis will explain some of this. This was something that Russ Estes, Bill Cohn, and I had written about 10 years before she came out with her study. No credit in the book, no suggestion of our research. So I thought, it's just a little bit annoying to see those sorts of things without it. Okay, let's move on to the original topic, which was going to be drones. First of all, some acknowledgments. I want to thank Bill Murphy, Susan and Rob Zwiatek, Greg Long, Paul Seaborn, Fran Ridge, and probably a dozen others that deserve some credit for the work that they have done on following the drone episodes in Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming. I originally thought of this as being an investigation of the drones, but it's kind of morphed into an anatomy of the investigation. And if you appreciate this, let me know in the comments, and we can do some additional shows where we do kind of an anatomy of the investigations. I've always talked about something I call chasing footnotes. And what that means simply is I'll find something written about in a book that I'm interested in following up on, and I take the footnote to the next step, to the next step, to the next step, till I get to the final source material. I chase it all the way to the end. Best example of this is I was looking for a UFO, a disc-shaped sighting just prior to Arnold's sighting, meaning in the weeks prior to this, because the skeptics have suggested that the idea of flying saucers was born by the misunderstanding of what Kenneth Arnold had said on the June 24 sighting. His June 24 sighting. I found a reference to an article that was quoted by Frank Edwards that talked about a sighting on June 23rd, disc-shaped objects. And I was able to follow that to another source, and finally learned that it had appeared in the Cedar Rapids Gazette. I went to the library and pulled the microfilm copies of the Cedar Rapids Gazette and finally found the original story. It wasn't on June 24th, as everybody had said. It actually the sightings apparently took place on June 24th, if we believe the guy, but it wasn't published until 2 or 3 days later. And that kind of negated the importance of it. The point simply is I was able to chase the source to the beginning and find out what the true story was, even though the footnotes would have led me to the conclusion I wanted to get to the original source. So I chase footnotes to the end sometimes. And you can use the internet to find this kind of information. It's available there if you ask the right questions, and sometimes you have to form the question very specifically. And the best example I can think of this is I was looking for a specific award. There was a presidential unit citation given to the 187th Assault Helicopter Company. And I would type in 187th Assault Helicopter Company and couldn't get to what I wanted. I finally typed in 187th with the TH, AHC, and it took me right to where I wanted to go. So you've got to form the questions right when you're doing the footnote. And the other thing that I would say is you have to look at both sides. You have to look at all the information available, both pro and con, and decide for you what is the most persuasive, rather than finding the information you want and then sort of abandoning the search at that. I've got what I wanted to say. I am lucky in that I know an awful lot of those people involved in UFO research, so that I can call them and ask them questions. I was listening to an audio tape with Charles Halt, the colonel from Rendlesham Forest, Peter Robbins, who wrote the book with Larry Warren, Left at Eastgate, Larry Warren and Robert Osler, talking about what was going on. And as I was listening to that, Halt asked Warren, had he ever taken a lie detector test? And Warren said no, but he had been given a voice stress analysis by Larry Fawcett. And I said to myself, I know Larry Fawcett. So I called him up and asked him. He said no, he'd never done that. He didn't give voice stress analysis. That wasn't his thing. The point is, I was able to get to the source or get to the final information because I happened to know the guy and I had his phone number and I could call him and get that. So now with all of that said, let's move on to drones. And these are unidentified aerial phenomenon, UFOs. And it was reported that they were being seen in unusual circumstances, unusual numbers, flying around eastern Colorado, sometimes into southwestern Nebraska and southeastern Wyoming. And if you look at a map of the area, it's sort of an area where those states are close together and those events were taking place. So it's something that was specific to that area. And it seemed unusual that they suddenly had all these drone sightings. And it gives us a chance to look at how UFO investigations should have happened in the beginning, or how they should be happening today as well, as opposed to the way they're actually conducted. And we start with the idea that they're looking at some kind of an unusual phenomenon, something that is strange, something that's captured their attention. But what's the difference here between the UAPs, the drones, and UFOs? Well, we know drones exist. I myself have a little one that I fly underneath my house periodically. They're used by everybody. TV stations use them for aerial footage. The military has, I suppose you could say, literally tens of thousands of drones in various size, shapes, and missions. With UFOs, we still question the reality. We wonder what they are. Can they be alien spacecraft? Are they some kind of an experimental aircraft? Are they just misidentifications of natural phenomenon? Are they delusions, hallucinations? Are they just outright lies told by the people who are reporting these things for their 10 minutes of fame, for their 10 minutes of television exposure? Sometimes I have trouble with words and I do not know why. But that seemed to be a good place to break off. When I come back, we'll talk a little bit about how this drone thing started in Colorado, what we know about it today, and what things we can learn about it and maybe apply to investigations of all kinds. I will, of course, put up more information about this and links to some various articles prepared by these people on my blog at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. Take a look at Roswell in the 21st century if you want to know what really happened there and get an idea of what I think is the truth. And of course, there's always Encounter in the Desert, which is an exploration of the Lonnie Zamora sighting from April of 1964 and gives you an idea of what that investigation entailed. I will be back right after this with more information about the drones. So stick around.
Patty Conklin grew up in Brooktondale, New York with a unique ability. Unlike others, she could see how the vibration of words and emotions affected the physical body. She discovered how to release stored emotion and facilitate healing. This began today's Conklin method of cellular cleansing. The private practice grew with tremendous results, as did her reputation. More and more people sought her out, bringing her into the home for healing. She soon realized she could even teach this to others, and they could shift perception and thus prevent illness from occurring. Patty Conklin quickly became a frequent keynote speaker, and she developed a curriculum for teaching the Conklin method of cellular cleansing. For more information, visit pattyconklin.com. PATTICONKLIN, pattyconklin.com, or call 404-474-0086. That's 404-474-0086.
Mission Evolution is dedicated to the well-being of the planet and animals, as well as the evolution of humankind. One major factor threatening all three is increasing toxicity. Heavy metals and other environmental toxins are poisoning our bodies, deteriorating our brains, blocking our spiritual connection, and shortening our lives. Yet these poisons are extremely difficult to remove. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, and I recently became aware of a product created from the marriage of nature and nanotechnology called Vitality. It's formulated from zoolite, whose crystalline structure binds toxins, gently carrying them out of the body. The light is only as clear as the window through which it shines. Clear your body, shine your light into the world. Visit vitalityhappens.com for a 20% discount. Enter code PATHHOME.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
I am here by myself talking about drones. And when we left, I just began to get into the aspect of the drones. Now, according to some of the documentation I was able to find, the first reports began on December 20th, 2019. As I delved deeper into it, I got a different date, and we'll get to that a little bit later. The information about the drones actually exploded on Christmas Eve, 2019, and it came from the Denver Post. As an aside, as I was growing up in the Colorado area, I actually carried the Rocky Mountain News, which was the competitor newspaper to the Denver Post, but that's a little personal side interest that is of no importance. What the Post reported was a band of large drones appears to be flying nighttime search patterns over northeastern Colorado. Local authorities don't know who is behind them. The drones stay about 200 to 300 feet in the air and fly in squares of about 25 miles. There are at least 17 drones, and they appear at night between 7 p.m. and disappear around 10 o'clock in the morning, or 10 o'clock in the evening, I should say. The FAA and the Air Force say that the drones are not theirs. The Army said there was no training program in the area that involves drones. And I should point out that Fort Carson, Colorado is close by, and it's a huge, huge military installation. So there's all sorts of training going on, but the Army says there's no training in the air that involves drones. And given the mission of the training at Fort Carson, I'm not surprised. One man said he watched 8 drones flying along the border of Yuma County, which again is northeastern Colorado. About 25 miles away, a single drone hovered all night. The drones fly too high to be heard, but can be seen because they're strobing red, blue, and green lights, which if you're trying to hide something, the last thing you want to do is put strobing lights on it. And I will point out that even the Predator drones, these big drones that the military uses, can basically hover at extreme altitudes. And they're small enough that when they get up to 20,000 feet, they really can't be seen but from the ground with the unaided eye, and the engines are virtually impossible to hear at those altitudes. One of the things that the people have asked about the drones, well, how come nobody's tried to shoot them down? And I think the Denver Post article covered that. It said at the end of the article, don't attempt to shoot down the drones. It's a federal crime. I think about something else. If you're firing a weapon into the air like that, you have to wonder about where the round is going to come down. And if you look at the stories of celebratory gunfire, these idiots that go out and they're celebrating something and firing their guns in the air, those rounds come down and people are injured. I know Mythbusters said if you fired straight into the air and if the round was coming straight down, it did not pick up enough terminal velocity to really injure anybody. But if you're firing at a trajectory, then people can be injured and can be killed. There's any number of documented cases of that happening. So I thought it was interesting that they point out it's a federal offense to try to shoot down the drones. On December 24th, again, Christmas Eve, more drones were reported, more than a dozen drones over Phillips and Yuma counties, again in northeastern Colorado. The drones were tracked by sheriff's deputies. So we have law enforcement involved in this. They seemed to be higher and were larger than FAA regulations allowed unless they were registered. And for those of you that don't understand this, the little hobby drones that some of us fly, they don't get high enough. They do not get, they're not large enough that they're not covered by FAA regulations. But if they meet certain criteria, and I think it's like 55 pounds and a wingspan of 6 feet, maybe smaller than that, then they must be registered with the FAA, and you have to follow the normal flight rules that you would follow if you were flying an aircraft. Well, in another story, we've got drones with a wingspan of 6 feet, flying at 200 to 300 feet above the ground. They noted in these stories that there seems to be nothing malicious or criminal going on. The drones are just out there flying. They're not really bothering anybody. It's noted that the decrease in prices of drones make them attractive to smugglers, and noted one man was sentenced to 4 years for attempting to smuggle drugs into a prison using a drone. I don't know if he was outside the prison trying to smuggle it to friends in there, or he was friends were trying to get the drone into him, or what was going on. But anyway, drones have been used like that. And in a line that sort of reflects the Roswell situation, one man said, "We just want to know if one lands, or if they see someone operating one. That's what we want." And this reminded me of Howard McCoy in a number of different briefings in the 1947-1948 era, said that he wished that one would crash so they could recover the debris and find out what was really going on. And it's kind of a stumbling block for those of us who lean toward the extraterrestrial for Roswell, where we have a guy who was on the inside and should have known what was going on, lamenting the fact they didn't have a crashed one. Although had one crashed at Roswell, he should have known it. So the question is, was he for some reason outside the loop, or was he lying about it, or was he telling the truth? Well, that's for you to make up your own mind, and I discussed that a little bit in Roswell in the 21st century. So anyhow, there's in these stories, and when alleged journalists, and I use that because I watch way too much of the news media on television, but the speculation begins to run wild, or at least to my mind it was running wild. They were trying to figure out challenging ways to trace the drones back to their point of origin, because they don't need runways. They can be launched and recovered from very small areas. And with their lights out, they're nearly impossible to see, especially in the dark. Drones don't take much money for one person or small group to operate the drones. And here's where we get into the wild speculation. The articles mention attacks on the Saudi oil fields in September of 2019, and I think you all remember that, the news about possibly the Iranians using drones to attack, try to set the oil fields on fire. They talked about stripping the video gear and replaced that with explosives or electronic warfare gear, which means you get a drone up in an area and it in essence broadcasts a jamming signal. Or they could swarm attack against a target, meaning you've got 15 or 20 things coming in at one time and you're trying to defend against that, and it's difficult to do if you're being attacked from all sides all at once by something that's so small and so hard to see. It's difficult to take them out. But then they mentioned something that becomes interesting, that the drones were sighted near the missile fields that are controlled out of Francis E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So now we're in southwestern Wyoming, and Cheyenne and Warren isn't that far north of the Colorado border, a little bit further from the Nebraska border, but we're now talking about the missile fields that are in that area. I'm not sure how many missile silos there are, but it's controlled by Warren Warren Air Force Base. I'll note that the Predator drones used extensively by the U.S. military, which I mentioned, fly high, remain in one place for hours, and are impossible from the ground. So they can just stand off and look to see what's going on. One article that is somewhat reminiscent of the early days of flying saucer reports, a sheriff's officer ruled out Santa and his reindeer. I don't know why they feel they have to make these kind of comments, because it kind of denigrates the whole investigation, but and that's a thing that we see with ufology frequently too. Well, what did the aliens look like? Or were they little green men? The kind of ridicule factor you bring to this. Well, we're dealing with something that's real here, and we just really don't have to make light of it in that fashion. Maybe I'm overreacting to that. Maybe I should have crossed that whole thing out. One of the texts reported that maybe it was aliens, so we're back to the alien aspect. But again, we're talking about drones. We're talking about something that is not interplanetary or interstellar, and certainly not large enough for what we're talking about here to carry any kind of an individual. There are some new observations that came out in that time frame, and there were reports as many as 30 drones flying together, and they sometimes are flying in 3 or 4 pairs together, so in kind of a formation like that. There was a theory that infrared on the drones to search for gas leaks. They were being used by the oil companies to search for gas leaks in their gas pipelines. And using the infrared at night, then they could pick up the leaks much easier than they could find them in the daylight using that sort of thing. But it seems if some company was doing that, and we're beginning to get the publicity for this, and it was national publicity, so we all knew about it, that it would seem to me that the company doing that would have gone to the sheriff, would have gone to the FAA, would have gone to the local authorities and let them in on the secret. Said, this is what we're doing. You don't need to worry about it. We're very careful about following the proper regulations. But that didn't happen, which suggests that, although an interesting explanation, it just isn't one that seems viable. The FAA reported that they had no information that would confirm the drones being used for that. The Lincoln County Sheriff, and Lincoln County, again being in northeastern Colorado, mentioned he had recently received a first report of a drone possibly hitting an aircraft out of the Lyman Airport. Lyman is in far eastern Colorado, just a little bit east of the border with Kansas. And he said, I would like it not to be in my county. In other words, the sheriff was not real happy with drone sightings in his county. And again, we get another warning about shooting them down. Don't do it. It's a federal crime. So what we're looking at here is the kind of reports we would get from flying saucers. A lot of people seeing the things, a lot of speculation about what it could possibly be, a lot of ideas about what it's not, checks with local authorities and that sort of thing to find out if we can resolve this and put everybody's mind to rest on it. When we come back, I'm going to take a look at some of the solutions for the drones, as we've mentioned briefly, and see if we can't figure out a little bit more about what is going on in Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming. And I hate to do this. I did a book called Conversations, which is completely off this topic, but it's a nice little book that deals with the possibility of past life regressions and that sort of thing. And I think it's a good story. And I'm just always stunned that it doesn't get more publicity and isn't thought of better than it is. If you're interested in Jack the Ripper, if you're interested in some of that thing, these things are covered in the book, and I think it'll give you an interesting perspective. But as I say, I will be back in just a moment, and we'll be talking more about drones unless I go off on a tangent. So please stick around.
Audience, if you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
Join Patty Conklin and Healing Within Radio each week. More than entertainment, Healing Within offers educational, useful tools for everyday life. Listen for help overcoming fear, anxiety, and depression. Patty knows about eliminating cancer, MS, dementia, Parkinson's, and a host of illnesses that we face every day. Life can be good. Life is good. All you need are simple tools to start changing your life. Start right now by visiting pattyconklin.com, PATTICONKLIN. No matter where you are in the world, you can work with Patty through Skype, phone, or in person, visiting one of her retreats in Georgia. Visit pattyconklin.com today or call our offices at 404-474-0086. That's pattyconklin.com or call 404-474-0086.
Coming soon to the X Zone Broadcast Network is A Different Perspective with me, Kevin Randle, as your host. We'll be taking a close look at what is happening in the world of UFOs today with side trips into the paranormal. Guests will range from those who are household names to those who have a different perspective on a variety of topics. No topic will be taboo, but there will be tough questions asked as we all search for the truth about UFOs, the paranormal, and those things that excite us. Sometimes we'll agree with a guest and sometimes we won't, but we'll try to keep the program topical. For those of you who would like to read, be sure to visit www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com and remember to listen to the other fine programs on the X Zone Broadcast Network at www.xzbn.net. When we went away, or when I went away, we were talking about the drones in Colorado. And some people were getting very worried about them, upset about them. I don't know if hysterical is the right word, but there was a lot of discussion going on. Made the national news. So Colorado sets up a state task force, but it was created after a Flight for Life helicopter pilot reported a drone had come close to his aircraft. So now we're getting to the point where the drones are becoming dangerous. And I know that rotor blades are very, very sensitive. And the slightest little thing can set up a vibration that is very, very dangerous. So if you flew a drone through the rotor disc of a helicopter and it collided with the disc and it didn't really have to dent it much or do much damage to it, it could set up these what we call one-to-one vibrations, and they could literally shake the aircraft apart. So they set up a task force. There were representatives of 77 different agencies, including the military, including the federal government, including law enforcement, including the newspapers, including everybody who was interested in this, for kind of a closed-door briefing in Brush, Colorado. Again, that's in northeastern Colorado. Driven through the town many, many times. The FAA requested information from many different companies and agencies and said, during this meeting, we have not been able to determine that any of these operators, I mean the drone operators, the operators of these companies, were the source of the drones. And it again mentioned that the drones seem to be operating in an area that contains the missile fields from Francis E. Warren Air Force Base. So they're wondering if it's some kind of surveillance of the missile silos, the missile sites, but it's not anything that's being done by the people at Warren Air Force Base, because they say, no, we're not doing that. It's not us, because once again, if they were doing it, there's no reason for them not to talk about it. Let's say it. The sheriff of Lincoln County, he set up a drone patrol, so he had his deputies out looking for the drones. And we got a new description from Lincoln County. He said an abnormal red light appears on the horizon, and then a drone flies over. It's square in shape. Well, we all know what a drone looks like with the 4 points, maybe 6 points of the rotor blades there, with red lights at the corners and a white light in the middle, flying at about 45 miles an hour and at a few hundred feet, and emitting a low hum or a high-pitched whine. So we're talking about something more than the hobbyist drones that we'd talked about before, because I know my drone does not emit a low-pitched hum or a high-pitched whine, but it does have the lights. So there you go. So let's get into some statistics, because when we're doing UFO reports, we do statistics and we analyze the data in that fashion. They said there have been about 90 drone reports from the hysteria that I was getting through the news media. I thought it was much higher than that. But in this article that talked about the breakdown of statistics, they said that the drone reports began at the end of November, not in the middle of December or late December, as the Denver Post story said. And these statistics went into the middle of January of this year. Of those reports that were investigated and they were able to learn something, 14 were small hobby drones. So we're back to people having fun with their drones and probably not trying to cause any trouble until they learn about this, and then they're out flying it to create problems. There were 23 reports, which included 90 from January 6th to January 13th. And again, they said 13 of those were small hobby drones, stars or planets. And this is something that's happened with UFO sightings that I've noticed as well. When you get a report that garners some sort of publicity, whether it's national or just local publicity, whether it's on the television or it's printed in the newspapers, you get people going out and looking where they wouldn't have been doing that before. I was in Grant County, Wisconsin in the sheriff's office because they were having a series of UFO sightings there. And I was in the office when a call came in and a guy said a UFO was landing in his backyard. One of the sheriff's deputies says to me, "You want to go?" And I said, "Sure, let's go." We get to the guy's house. He takes us through. We get to the backyard, and he points to a flashing red light on the horizon. And he says, "There it is. It's been hovering there for the last 30 minutes. And I looked at the deputies, and they looked at me, and we realized it was a red flashing light on the top of a radio tower. He had just never noticed it before. I don't know how long he'd lived in the house, but he was reporting to us something that he should have known was in his local area. We had another similar event where a guy called and we went there and he pointed up at this white object that looked like it was moving. It was the moon. And there was a lot of low-hanging clouds and there was a high wind and the clouds were moving really fast and it gave an impression of motion to the moon. But the guy was looking at the moon, for crying out loud. So I know people make these mistakes. They're not familiar with what's in the sky around them. They're not familiar with seeing the stuff under unusual circumstances. So when they say that some of the drone sightings were stars and planets, I'm on board, especially if you're looking at Venus. At its closest approach to the Earth, it can be extremely bright. It can look like it's shooting rays down to the ground and all sorts of weird stuff. So, you've got to understand that. Six of these sightings were commercial aircraft. If you've got a high-flying aircraft and the wind's blowing the wrong way, you'll never hear the sound from it, and you just see the lights, and the orientation of the lights and where you're standing can make it look really, really strange. I once was watching what I thought was a domed disc until the aircraft turned and I heard the jet engines and I realized what it was. But the configuration of the lights from my perspective gave me the impression of a domed disc. But I watched it for like 10 or 15 seconds before I realized what it was. And of those, 4 were confirmed as unidentified. They were drones. I mean, nobody knew where they were coming from. The other thing I should point out here is there was a phenomenon in, I think it's Seattle, Washington, but on the West Coast in the early 1950s, where people were reporting their windshields were being pitted by all the atomic tests going on in the air in the Pacific, and the wind was blowing the radiation and stuff, and it was pitting their windshields. And when the scientists investigated, what they found out was, and anybody who's driven a car understands this, you don't look at the windshield, you look through it. But when they started the stories talking about the windshield pitting, people began looking at their windshields, and they noticed pitting that had been there. They just hadn't noticed it before because you're looking through the windshield. So I can understand some of this. But as I say, the statistics were beginning to look a lot like the thing we see with UFO sightings. Lots of reports, lots of people not understanding what they're seeing, and very few that aren't identified in some fashion. And like I said, those identifications that we talked about include stars and planets and other astronomical phenomena, weather-related phenomena, strange lights, all that sort of thing. Again, the military has thousands of drones, some as large as single-engine aircraft. But the Air Force, when they're doing their inspections, whenever they do it, are using small drones, and the other drones really aren't doing much in the United States, and the drones being used are really out of a visible range for people. And there were some ridiculous things going on, and as I mentioned, some observers believed that the UFOs could be alien visitors. Other locals say what they were seeing was merely quadricopter-style drones. So you've got an argument about alien visitors and the kind of drones. As they said, there was nothing about these sightings that's inconsistent with drone technologies. So why do we reach for the most extreme explanation, Seth, what is Shotek, an astronomer with studies, said? Why say aliens when you've got the drones? So that's what he told to the Daily Beast, which is a newspaper in the Colorado area. And then we get into the silly, where they're talking about everybody knows that alien spacecraft prefer the American Southwest. It must be the Tex-Mex cuisine. So we get into the silly. And once again, I'm thinking, well, maybe this should be an outrageous comment, but then you think about it and you think, well, not so much, because we're dealing with something that's not really malicious, is not really dangerous, as the law enforcement pointed out repeatedly. Nobody's really been hurt. We've got a close approach by a couple of a drone to a couple of aircraft, but nothing was damaged. And maybe we're being a little bit overly serious about this, and maybe a little levity is just the thing that we need to talk about. And as they said in the newspapers repeatedly, the Air Force and other military branches operate thousands of unmanned drone vehicles, ranging from airliner-sized global Hawk spy drones to Reaper hunter-killers the size of Cessnas. The military equips many of its ground units and ships with hand-launched drones, including quadricopter-style models. And they use those for reconnaissance. They got cameras on them. The guy's sitting there with his laptop. They fly it over the ridgeline. They know if the enemy's there, if there's an ambush there. They're becoming an important part of the battlefield. So there's the potential for the military doing this sort of thing, but none of the military installations around that area would cop to it. And there's no reason for them not to explain it if they were doing it. I'm going to break off here before we get to the civilian solution for the drones, which we came up. And we'll talk about that in the last segment. Once again, I would like to ask you to take a look at the copy of Roswell in the 21st Century. I think it is a good compendium of what we know about Roswell that may clarify some of the points. And as I say, I'll be back with some of the civilian solutions to the drone problem when we come back. So please stick around.
If you are looking for a safe, zero-calorie natural option to the harmful artificial sweeteners on the market today, Just Like Sugar is what you're looking for. Just Like Sugar is a wonderful natural alternative for those health-conscious people who choose a calorie-restricted diet with a great, pure, sweet flavor that tastes just like sugar. Just Like Sugar is a great natural option for people suffering from diabetes and may be useful in restricted diet programs where standard sugars are not allowed and does not cause a laxative effect of some other sweeteners. Just Like Sugar comprises a perfect blend of chicory root fiber, natural calcium, natural vitamin C, and Just Like Sugar's sweetness comes from the natural flavors from the peel of the orange. Just Like Sugar is a natural alternative to harmful artificial sweeteners and will change the way that you believe all natural sweetener products taste. Just Like Sugar is available at your local Whole Foods markets, Wild Oats markets, Henry's, Sun Harvest, and many other fine natural food stores in the U.S., Canada, and worldwide. They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by Ellie Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year cover-up exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now and receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world, interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Memorable dynamic presentations are a not-so-secret weapon in the business world. Do you have a powerful message that must be shared, but you haven't found a way to deliver that message? Do you want to be known as a top public speaker who gets amazing results? Are you ready to create and deliver your powerful message? Thomas Hides can help you create and deliver your speech to get the results you desire. Visit iconquality.com.
Did you expect your business to flourish, but instead it plateaued or didn't get off the ground yet? Would you like to achieve massive goals and discover new sources of income within your business? When you're ready to experience that type of success with fast results, Cindy Hendricks is the business coach for you. Her work with entrepreneurs and business owners has been life-changing. To get you and your business where you want to be, go to imaginemoresuccess.com.
Has the fear of public speaking stalled your business or personal life? What would you give to develop and maintain supreme confidence? Have an invaluable private program to always perform at your best. Imagine how you would feel. You can have all that and so much more today with Thomas Hides' life-changing course called Number One Fear Unleashed. Visit numberonefear.com and be liberated from your fear of public speaking.
When we took our break, I had reached the point where I was going to talk about some of the civilian solutions to the drone problem. And I think this is why we don't hear much about the drones anymore. I mean, it was big news in December, and it's pretty much faded away. And maybe it's because we've gotten into the nonsensical presidential primary cycle here in the United States or something. I don't know. But anyhow, these stories have kind of disappeared. So what we've learned is Michael Spicer of Durango, Colorado, told the Journal Advocate that a group known as Archangel Recon from Wichita has been chasing what he believes is the mysterious unidentified aerial phenomena, the UAPs that we mentioned periodically, first encountered by a Navy pilot in 2014. I don't understand that connection, but this is what he said. He said the group was trying to track what they believe is a new technology aircraft, some have dubbed the Tic Tac, because of how it was described by the Navy reports. So there's something he's looking for. They're trying to, I guess, spy on the next generation of aircraft. He said not only was his group tracking the so-called Tic Tac itself, but also another aircraft they believe was flying underneath it. Spicer said he couldn't confirm that all of the stories told by people about the drones could be attributed to the Archangel Recon's flights, but did say the group sends up flights of between 6 and 12 drones that fly patterns based on longitude and latitude, which is why they appeared to be flying grid patterns. So now we finally got to some guy who's talking about what they were doing. He said the group was unaware of the stir caused by his drones until he was contacted recently by the FAA. He said he was interviewed by Special Agent Michael Baumberger of the FAA's Investigations Law Enforcement Assistance Program. He said none of the Archangel Recon's drones were ever flown anywhere near any airport, and that they did not encounter any other civilian aircraft. So he's saying we're out there doing this thing, we're using drones to look for experimental aircraft, alien spacecraft, whatever. But they were keeping the drones away from spaceports, and or not spaceports, although there is a spaceport in New Mexico, by the way, if you look at the maps. And it's not Roswell, it's actually White Sands has an emergency landing strip for the shuttle, which I wanted to clarify that spaceport comment. But the point simply is they were following the regulations as the FAA has set down, following VFR rules, staying away from the airports and restricted areas and that sort of thing. There was another explanation for it as well, and it was the EPA was flying the drones, counting cattle to see if the ranchers were in violation of waste disposal. You know, they were counting the number of cars, the number of cows, and compared it to the manure that was being, shall we say, created. So they were trying to see if there was some kind of pollution going on, and the ranchers were underreporting the number of cows they had to reduce the possibility of fines or penalties or whatever. So that's kind of where we are. I mean, we've got two explanations that seem perfectly logical, and there's no reason to reject Spicer and his comments or the EPA's ideas. But what do we conclude from all this? Well, as I said, there's a parallel between UFO reports and reports of these drones. People are disturbed by what they see in the sky, although I'm not sure why, because the law enforcement, everybody said that it's not malicious, there's no danger. The witnesses provide what sounds like accurate descriptions for the most part, and if they don't provide accurate descriptions, you're not going to be able to identify anything. And the fact that some of these things were identified as hobby drones and other natural phenomenon tells us that we're getting good descriptions from the witnesses, meaning times and directions and altitudes and that sort of thing. Even if they're standing on the ground and pointing up to where I saw the thing, it gives you an idea of how high the thing could have been. Law enforcement, the FAA, the military are confused by the objects. They don't know what it is, but it's because they're not responsible for it, and these things are being reported to them. And as I said, the big difference between UFOs and what's going on here is we know the drones exist, but we have questions of whether or not UFOs are alien spacecraft. And we know a lot of UFO reports are misidentifications. The reports of the drones were all taken seriously, and the reports of UFOs, at least traditionally in the last 50 years, have been traditionally rejected or made fun of. You know, one of the first headlines I remember was from 1947, where it reported drones were seen in like 38 states, but not Kansas, because Kansas was a dry state. The implication being, if you're seeing a flying saucer, you're drunk. And I think that was kind of the thing after the first couple of weeks of UFO reports, and as things were going on, it moved into the realm of ridicule. What we know, and I hated to use the term hysteria, but it kind of gripped the area. And what that means, again, people were looking for the drones. They're outside looking for the drones. Some people are kind of frightened by the whole thing going on. They don't know what's happening. The fear of the unknown is great. But we see by the statistics that I mentioned a minute ago that everyday items are misidentified. So we have that problem as well. After weeks of investigation by all sorts of people, and I guess wasting an awful lot of time and money, we see some solutions. Hobbyists with their toys, not a problem. And I would imagine that once the information began being publicized, that people with their drones were out there having a little bit of fun. The Wichita company chasing drones. We're talking about Wichita, Kansas, which is in the eastern part of Kansas. It's a long ways to the area where the drones are being seen in Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming. Warren Air Force Base mentions they do have some drones, but they're not responsible for this. And unless they're using the drones to check their missile fields, in which case they might deny it because that might, I don't know, pinpoint where the missile silos are. But I mean, you drive around enough county roads, you're going to see the evidence of the missile silos because they're well guarded and they're fenced in, and it's obvious what they are when you see them. So I can't imagine why they would keep this secret if they were actually doing this, simply because it makes no sense. I think where we end up here is much ado about nothing. There was no malicious attempt that has been observed. No one was injured, as I mentioned, and it seems that those flying the drones are not in violation of FAA regulations. Though it seems that new regulations are being proposed, and that was one of the things I noticed in some of the articles that I had looked at, was ideas of what regulations needed to be proposed to prevent accidents between drones and aircraft. And the other thing, what if you get a drone high enough and gets sucked into a jet engine? It causes an engine failure. Getting close to a helicopter through the rotor blades, going close to a private airplane and get sucked through the propeller. It can cause damage and can bring down an aircraft. So we've got to take a look at all of that. But the latest that I could find, and I was looking for something more recent on this sort of thing, but the number of sightings are down, and I think it's because people have moved on. It's just no longer a fascinating thing, and the holidays are over. We're all back to work, more or less. So we don't have an opportunity to do that. But what I saw here was the way flying saucers should have been investigated in 1947. And I think that in the beginning, the military was doing that. But once they realized there was no threat to national security, that there was no alien invasion coming, that it wasn't Soviet inspired, they no longer cared. And then we got into the idea where people were seeing spots before their eyes. They were fooled by natural phenomenon. A good investigation should have been conducted, and we should know about it. And I know there are areas of the UFO phenomena where the investigation was conducted, and we do not have those records yet. We still get redacted reports and things like that. So I think that, unless everything is hidden under a blanket of national security, which sometimes happens, we would know a lot more. For those interested in the information about drones, there is what else? Yes, a Facebook page for the Drone Intelligence Center, Colorado, Nebraska, Wyoming. I will get the website linked on my blog at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com so that you can link to it and see what they have to say and see what the latest information is. And apropos of nothing at all, I had a thought that the Colorado Drones would be a good name for a sports team or a rock band. Just struck my mind there. Bottom line to this, I think, is the interest is eroded. The reports seem to be way down, and people are off doing something else. which I'm going to be doing here in just a moment. If you enjoyed this, if you like the kind of investigation done here without a guess, with me kind of saying what I'd found, injecting my thoughts and evaluations in all of this, put a note in the comments section. Don't have to publish it if you don't want me to, but let me know what you think. And if you've enjoyed this, we'll do some more of them, because there's any number that can be done. The blog is www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com, and as I say, I'll put a little bit more information up there so you can see what's you can make your own research to see if I've satisfied the requirements of an investigation into this phenomenon. Roswell in the 21st century, I mention this every week. I think it provides a very good look of what was going on in Roswell in 1947. Encounter in the Desert gives a good look at an Air Force investigation, Lonnie Zamora sighting, and some other ancillary information. I will be back next week with David Schindel talking about missile sightings and UFOs. So join us in about 167 hours. Thanks for listening.